I hope that I'm saying the name right. I think it's either Mayhem or Mayim. I think it's Mayim. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. Home Invasion, My Story is the title. Have you ever felt fear? No need to answer, of course. You have. You've felt fear. Everybody has at one point or another. Now, have you ever felt fear so extreme that you can feel your sanity slipping, your muscles constricting and sweat, possibly even tears streaming down your face from a nightmare you've been consumed into, either willingly or by force? I have felt such fear, just once, however, last summer when I was just 16 years old, and my home fell victim to a home invasion. This memory has been heavily repressed by me, as I've yet to experience anything even remotely close to the horror I went through that night. The date was June 1st, 2017. I remember it clearly because I had just finished my sophomore year of high school that very day, and with glee and overwhelming excitement for a summer that I had thoroughly planned to be great, I decided to invite my best friend Austin over for a night of bullshitting around, playing video games, and doing whatever else we could think of. At that time, I lived with only my dad, as my parents had divorced eons ago, or at least it felt that long, when in reality it was a decade or so. My dad worked night shifts at a 24/7 gas station not far from my home, only about a 15-minute walk up a rather dead Midwestern road, with minimal buildings or businesses, except for the aforementioned gas station he worked at. To put my town into perspective, and for future reference in this story, my town is on the larger side, being located about an hour north of Chicago. However, the area of town I live in is very barren of houses or businesses, so my house was very distant from my neighbours, another factor that plays into the scenario. Austin arrived via dirt bike around 9 that night, and I was a bit sad to see a thick layer of fog settling over the fields around my house, meaning we couldn't ride our bikes around the trails that night if we happened to get bored. We played a bit of Call of Duty from what I remember, the two of us gossiping about people from school, about the upcoming summer, and how our high school days were coming to an end, when I could have sworn I heard the sound of a vehicle on my gravel driveway. As stated before, I live far out in the country in my area of town, and have no close neighbours, so my immediate thought was my dad had gotten off work earlier than expected. Hold on a sec, I think my dad is home, I say, as Austin pauses the game, the two of us quickly standing up off my carpet and peering out the blinds. I was especially confused to not see my dad's red truck, but instead a black van with dark tinted windows and no headlights on, making it only visible due to the moonlight illuminating it on sitting idle in my driveway. Almost instantly I felt my heart drop in my chest. This clearly wasn't my dad, and for the life of me I couldn't remember ever seeing a black van anywhere in my town before. Obviously this had me perplexed, as Austin and I continued to stare out the blinds as I tried to make some sort of resolution to this, but to no avail. The van didn't budge, and despite barely being able to see the van through the fog, I felt extremely uneasy, as if whoever was behind the wheel was staring right at us. Then it hit me. My TV and light in my room were the only lights in the entire house that were on. There was no way they hadn't noticed us staring at them, as from the outside they could easily make out the two of us on the second floor in the only lit up room, looking down at them. I push Austin away from the window as he gives me a very concerned look. Maybe they're lost, or at the wrong house, Austin asks, running his hand through his hair and looking at me for an answer. Knock, knock, knock. The two of us jolt back at the jump scare of 3 loud knocks on my and began to search for my keys, which had my pocket knife and dirt bike keys. I'm the type of person to attempt to make an escape route, and had always wondered why the people in these stories stayed inside when someone is in their home. I could never wrap my head around it. Despite the fear and angst I was feeling, I knew we had to get the hell out of there, and fast. Knock, knock, knock. The knocks erupted again as I quietly nudge Austin and point outside. Make sure you have your phone and get your keys for your bike out and ready. We'll go out the back door. Both doors are locked and we can slip away, I whisper as Austin gulps, as I begin to search my room for my keys. I carefully grab my keys off my nightstand and Austin hands me my phone, as we wait for an indication that maybe we aren't just being paranoid. The knocks continue every minute or so as I begin to ignore them and listen for anything else, any other sign that this isn't someone needing help or lost. As we sit in silence, just the sounds of our heavy breathing, I hear the distinct crunch of footsteps from outside. Both windows in my room were open, facing out toward where the van was parked. As I shush Austin and gesture out to the footsteps, the knocks happen again, meaning we weren't being paranoid. The knocks and footsteps had corresponded, meaning at least 2 people were outside my home. As scared as I was still able to rationalize things, and was somehow calmer than I expected myself to be in a situation such as this one. There's someone at the door and someone outside the window below us, dude, Austin says, choking on his whisper and breathing heavier. I nod and motion for us to go down the stairs. My room was at the very end of the hallway leading up to the stairs, with a room on the right and on the left, making just 3 rooms in total. As my confidence in escape began to manifest stronger, I came to a realization as we crept towards the stairs that the knocking had stopped. Austin and I had come to a halt at the top of the stairs as muffled voices became audible from the other side of the door, which is at the end of the staircase on the left, not far from our current position. My friend was clutching his keys in his knuckles and panting as I attempted to remain calm. If we were both in a state of panic, we would be screwed. At least 2 ruffled voices were at the front of the house, just as what I can assume to be a van. A van door slammed shut in the driveway, the sound echoing and making both of us jump. I exchange a glance with Austin, who says nothing, and I try to listen closer, just as one of the voices laughs a genuine laugh, bellowing and raspy-like. As the laughing subsides, I hear the sound of gravel being crushed and moved, however quieter than before. Maim, the bikes, Austin hisses, as the realization hits me. These guys had probably followed us home to steal our dirt bikes. In a stroke of what seemed like luck and quick thinking, I had an idea. Having felt anger bubble up inside me, I sprang up and ran down the hall into my room, and while knowing I couldn't take 3 grown men in a fight, I settled on taking photos, hoping the van and our bikes could be tracked by police. At this point, I had totally lost my calm demeanor and was outright pissed. Taking my phone out my pocket and not bothering to put in my password, I swipe my camera up and open and begin to spam the picture button, but I'm quickly blinded by a bright white flash in my room. I open my eyes and see the photos in the bottom right of my camera app as my heart drops and I begin to curse and mentally kick myself. My camera flash had been on, and without a doubt the men had seen the flashes. The gravel scraping outside had stopped and silence was again in place. I dug down below my window and set my phone down and wait for a moment before inching my eyes up to the glass and squinting into the floor. still, my breathing grew more and more rapid, sweat pouring off my face as the two men with our bikes loaded them into the van and slammed the door shut before returning to the front of the van. As the third man disappears into the driver's seat for a moment, before my thoughts could even begin to construct in my head, my entire driveway and yard is engulfed in a bright yellow light as the van headlights illuminate the entire general area around my house. With little to no time to register my plan, I quickly stealth across my room, with Austin already moving ahead of me. As we sprint down the hall and bound down the stairs, allowing me to close my eyes for a brief moment, only to be met with a blood-curdling scream from Austin. I flip my head to the left to see the three men, now standing in what could almost be daylight from how bright the headlights were, directly outside my front door, their faces expressionless and cold. My legs give out from fear as I hit the bottom step, sliding across the wood floors and into the wall opposite the stairs. "We're calling the cops," Austin screams, and now the nearly grinning men each take a step back as one of them tosses something into the air and catches it with one hand before brandishing it off to the two of us. Austin and I now standing in my living room and inching toward the middle hallway leading to the back door. As quickly as I could notice the object, now knowing it to be a brick, the man chucks it through the glass window in the middle of the door with a deafening smash of glass, sending tiny shards flying in each direction, littering my living room door floor. Remember the first words of this when I asked if you felt that certain kind of nearly life-ending fear. That exact moment when that vile man annihilated my front door with a brick, that's when I genuinely felt real fear. The man who had broken the glass quickly shoves his hand through the mess of hanging shards and begins to fumble with the doorknob as I shove Austin into a running position as we take off across the ground floor of my house. The door must not have been cooperating with the burglars, because as Austin and I tripped and fumbled toward the back door, the very distinct crunch of the front door being kicked in erupts in a loud cracking echo across my empty home. Just as we reach the back screen door and burst through it into the cold night, I managed a single look behind me as I noticed just one of the three men coming through the kitchen, while Austin and I had already made it to the tree line that was about 50 yards from my back door, sprinting through the wet grass and bushes, damp from rainfall earlier that day. The two of us stumbled into the woods, crunching leaves and tripping over roots and weaving around trees as we attempted to find a safe place to call the police. We should have done it right off the bat, of course, but we were stupid teenagers, and neither of us were mentally prepared for something like this. With the sounds of the forest the only thing louder than our raspy breathing, I finally began to calm myself enough to feel for my cell phone to get the police out here, and to my dismay, I remember I left it on the windowsill when they had shined the headlights at the house. "Austin, my phone is at the house. Call the cops off yours," I hiss through jagged breathing, and he does, whipping his phone out, and for the first time I had ever seen, clicking on the emergency call button and puts it up to his ear. In maybe the 10-second span between me informing him of my phone being at the house and him dialing 911 off his own phone, I had heard a series of footsteps and whispering not far from our current position behind some brush. As I began to panic, Austin began to frantically describe our situation to the operator as I sighed relief for the first time in over an hour. There's three guys and they stole our bikes and they have a black van, and Austin begins to explain before looking toward me for a moment, his eyes wide and filled with absolute terror. "Give me your address, dude, hurry." I list off my address as I quickly began to feel fear rising again, as the two of us had been shouting into the phone in a very quiet forest, and I prayed the men wouldn't find us from our loud behaviour. However, Please help us, Austin screams into the phone, and I pull him up. The both of us screaming and now soaking wet and covered in dirt and small bleeding cuts, and once again take off into the darkness. Despite continuously running into branches and tripping over roots, Austin and I had the physical advantage over the three overweight men, and once again gained a good distance from the men. We once again decided to take a breather not far from the driveway, as I realized we had run in a half circle and we were rather close to the house again. As we sat there, my mind began to take over, playing out different scenarios. The men had clearly only come back due to the fact I had photographed them committing a number of crimes. That idea still seemed good, as we had been such a far distance from the van that the pictures they took were probably useless. Dude, we're not far from where their van is parked. The pictures I grabbed are probably shit, and they've put us through some maniac shit tonight. I'm gonna go grab a picture of their van, I whisper, and Austin says nothing, handing me his phone. Then dropping into a fetal position on the boulder we sat on and examining the numerous cuts on his arms and legs. Just as I took the photo, with my heart beating out of my chest and my body physically exhausted, I could see the blue and red lights flashing at the end of my driveway as they approached, and I couldn't help but feel a grin at the edges of my mouth. I quickly stood out of my stealthy position in the trees and put my hands up as the first two police cars barreled towards us. As I said, I managed to take a photo of the van in my driveway. However, it is very low quality due to Austin's phone being soaking wet and him having an Android. Here's the pic so you know I'm not bullshitting. So, how did it end? Well, the police arrived at my house before the men could even get back to their van, meaning the photo was worthless anyway, but a small consolation is that it helps credit my story. The men ended up being caught hours later, stumbling through the woods, trying to evade the police sirens, and suffice to say, I was rather traumatized, as was Austin. According to police, the men had simply followed Austin on his dirt bike from his house, and decided to try and steal it from wherever he was going. Motive is rather clear, I suppose. The men were charged, and the short list of charges I'm aware includes burglary, breaking and entering, damage to the property, criminal stalking, and I believe causing endangerment to minors. Although I could be wrong on a few, and there could be more charges I was never made aware of. As for Austin and I, we're still friends, and we are heading into our senior year. All is well, except for some bad memories of that night. There may be a news article online somewhere, and if you would like to read about it, I could try and dig it up. Anyway, that's the story of how I was nearly killed in a home invasion. Thanks for reading. That is incredibly creepy. That's insane. And they did include the picture of the van. That would freak me out so badly. Okay, this next one is by Dom, the creator, 14. It's titled "My Home Invasion Has Turned into Something More Horrifying." Have you ever walked around your own home and got an odd feeling? Like almost everything in your house is normal, but very slight things have changed, but you can't figure it out. About an hour ago, this happened to me. I have been house sitting for my mother all week as she's been on a cruise. Everything has gone smoothly up until today. Again, around 10 p.m, I awoke to the sound of static. The crinkling noise was quiet at first, but my eyes swung open as the sound became deafening. I jumped off the couch to press the power button on my TV. Once the horrible noise was gone, my mind finally finished calibrating. I looked at the couch as a feeling of confusion came over me. I didn't remember falling asleep on the couch. In fact, I could have sworn that I had fallen asleep in my bed. As a way to wake myself up further, I started to look around the living room. I have two couches, one next to the window and one facing the TV against the wall. On the window couch I nice jester outfit, I truly felt afraid. Not just because those dolls are generally seen as creepy, but I actually feared for my well-being, even though I had no real reason to. The third difference I noticed was when my arm brushed against my shorts. When I sleep, I always keep my phone in my pocket, but it was gone. I looked all around the room, but I couldn't find it. "Okay, joke's over, babe," I yelled out. I expected a response, but definitely not the one I got. After a few seconds of silence, the radio in my mother's room turned on. The blaring speakers played big band music, but the radio was so loud that it sounded more evil than gleeful. My mother's room. I sprinted down the hall and ran into my mother's room. Anytime I'm faced with an unexpected loud noise, for some reason, I get pretty angry. So as I reached for the volume knob, I began yelling. It was for no real reason, but I just kept yelling. Just as I was about to turn the radio off, a female singer jumped in. Her words were chilling. Buried alive, my screams, I recall. Years went by, people came, and I shut it off. But that was just my body. My mind screamed at me to turn it back on and hear what the hell the woman was saying. I put it to a low volume, but I didn't hear the woman's crooning or the band. Just a popular catchy pop song. At this point, the whole spot the difference thing had slipped my mind, but when I turned around, it came back in a big way. My mother has 3 family portraits above her bed, but to my horror, my head was cut out of each one. The fact that this was an obvious threat didn't scare me the most. What did was the fact that somebody had the time to take each picture out, cut out my head, place the picture back into the frame, and hung it perfectly straight. I got into my bed at 9:45. The door to my mother's room had been open all day, and I never once noticed anything odd. I climbed onto her bed to inspect the pictures better. Boom. I shit you not, what sounded like a gunshot came from across the hall in my room. The noise scared me so badly that I fell forward into the frame, so my hand was cut off from the broken glass. At this point, any sensible person would just leave, right? I knew I should have, but I felt like my body was pulled towards my room. With my back against the wall, I slowly opened the door to my room. My room. I let out a shriek when I saw what was in my room. Everything was changed. It wasn't some things being moved around. Every damn thing in that room was moved to a different area, but there was only one thing out of place. A folded piece of paper sat on my pillow. Let's get obvious. The handwriting was even worse than the previous note. As I put down the note, I looked straight ahead. My bedroom is right up next to our raised porch, with sliding glass doors, keeping my room from being outside. A knot the size of a bowling ball grew in my stomach as I looked at the table on the porch. Bob had been set up right in the middle of it. As a side job, my mother teaches CPR, and Bob is one of the 7 dummies we have for those classes. Bob was being propped up by what looked like a rusty old pipe. He had a ball gag over his mouth and knives in both of his eyes, but what scared me the most about Bob's mutilation was the message painted on his torso. Locks couldn't keep us out. That's when I heard footsteps under me, coming from the basement. My mouth slowly dropped open and I froze, trying to count the footsteps. From what I gathered in those 5 seconds, 3 people were moving around in my basement. Just like that, my body kicked into overdrive. I sprinted out of my room, down the hall and to the front door. I was scared out of my mind because the door to the basement is pretty much beside the front door. I hadn't even looked out the front door before I heard it. No, there's no leaving. I nearly got whiplash with how quickly my neck snapped upwards. Outside my front door was a very built person wearing a blue mechanic's outfit and a plain white mask. It seemed like the 5 seconds we locked eyes was actually 5 hours, but this person sprinting towards the back door. I could hear the man on my front porch yell "fuck" as if he didn't expect me to do that. Once I had reached the back door, I heard the basement door open and a bunch of stomping footsteps followed. But before they could even all get out of the door, I was already halfway down my backyard porch steps. Once I reached the bottom, I looked behind me. The large gate that led into my backyard was wide open, and the man from earlier was in the opening, this time brandishing a bat. I didn't even look again to see if the man was chasing me. I just ran towards my back fence, hopped over it, and started screaming for help. I have a small patch of woods behind my house, and luckily a few teenagers sat on a log chugging hard iced tea. It didn't take much of my story to convince them to let me use their phone. The only girl there gave me hers. I explained everything to the operator. She told me that squad cars were on their way, but that none of us were safe in the open, so we all ran to my neighbour's house. If you're reading this, thank you, Daryl, for letting us in. The cops arrived 4 minutes later and swept the house before anything else. They didn't find anybody there, but they did find a bunch of horrifying tools set up in my basement. They assumed that I must not have been paying attention to the basement much, but I tried to reassure them that I had gone down there today around 8:30 to play Xbox. That's impossible. The whole setup they had down there would have taken at least 3 hours to put together, the sheriff told me. The time frame of the crime didn't add up to any of us. They also questioned how I didn't wake up when they moved me. Talking to them honestly felt like a really bad nightmare sequence from a David Lynch movie. It didn't feel real. Most of the cops left around 11:45. They have a squad car set up outside in case I need them. I convinced my mum to stay on a cruise. I felt safe with the cop car. Besides everything being moved, things felt relatively normal until I entered the bathroom, a room where I hadn't spotted the difference. The soap was all over the floor, my shower curtain was shredded, my phone was behind the toilet, wrapped in toilet paper, and another message was painted on the mirror. We are everywhere, we are everyone, no safe haven. I audibly said, how the fuck? Why wasn't this told to me by the police? Why was this room not brought up at all? My heart began to race as I ran into my living room to look out the window. The squad car still sat in my driveway, but nobody was in it. Instead, 2 police uniforms sat on the hood. I tried calling 911, but my phone isn't working. My neighbours aren't even home, even though they were 30 minutes ago. I'm not trying to write a cliche, the author dies at the end story, because right now I'm very much alive, but I'm worried that I won't be. But if I am, I want to share my story and ask all of you, if you had been in a situation like this, one where everything almost feels normal, but in fact everything seems to be contributing to your death. Damn, that one was really, really good. It gives kind of the strangest vibes with all the masked people. I would love a follow-up to that one. That one is really good. I really wish there was more to it. Okay, the last story for tonight is by Guyver_0. It's just titled Home Invasion. 3 nights ago, I awoke to the sound of someone pounding on my front door. Bang, bang, bang. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding. I moved toward the living room. The microwave in the kitchen read 3:17 a.m. No one should be awake right now. No one should be pounding on the door. Bang, bang, bang. My front door has a frosted glass window. In front of it is a screen door. Whoever was pounding on the door was pounding on the side of the house, because I could hear the screen door rattle slightly with each hit. Through the frosted glass I could make out the fuzzy shape of a person. I crept closer, all the while thinking that this must have been some mistake, or that some drunk maniac from around the neighbourhood had gotten lost and didn't know what time or day it was. Sorry about my stomach. I peeked out of the one shirt with a hood pulled over their head. I didn't recognize their height or shape. A chill came over me. The figure turned quickly. Bang, bang, bang. I jumped back. He, she, it grabbed the door handle, started to jiggle the lock aggressively. There was no way I was opening this door. My wife was sleeping in our bedroom out back. My daughter was upstairs. Stop, I yelled. I've got a gun in here. I was lying, obviously. I hadn't even had time to grab my cell phone, and I'd stupidly forgotten the baseball bat by the side of my bed. Bang, bang. No, you don't, came the response. The voice sounded metallic, strained, like it was used to screaming. The figure grabbed the door handle again and murderously attempted to get the door open. I thank God I had remembered to lock the door and began to think about whether the other ones were secure too. That's when I heard the recognizable sound of my sliding glass door opening. I froze. One figure was still on the porch. Something else was entering the house. The glass doors of the kitchen, which was between me, my wife in the back, and my daughter upstairs. I was in a total panic. My brain wouldn't let me do anything. Michael, came a voice from the kitchen. It had that same metallic quality to it. It was not my wife's voice, and my name is not Michael. Michael! 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 A figure leapt out into the open space in the kitchen. He landed with the sickening grace of a ballerina. He was tall, lanky. His back was to me, but it was as if he knew exactly where I was. I was frozen. Michael! He spun around and I found myself staring into the mask of death. Eyelids had been stitched shut, but the mouth had curled up into a wide grin. The thing cocked its head sideways. Not, it began. Michael. Bang, bang, bang. The door jiggling. Bang, bang. The figure on the porch was furiously pounding on the door. I felt stuck. Suddenly a light turned on in the back. James, what's going on? My wife had woken up. At the sudden flood of light, the thing in the kitchen spun and recoiled. I found my courage and lunged at the creature, but it shrugged me off as if it were disciplining an overzealous dog. I landed on the kitchen floor and the thing fled the kitchen, out the same way it got in. Gone also was the figure from the porch. I looked at the clock, 3:23. The old deal had taken less than 10 minutes. My wife arrived and was thoroughly confused about what I was doing. We need to call the police, I told her and explained what had just happened. The cops were convinced it was just a simple home robbery attempt. They told me the duo must have thought I lived alone